lot of turtles.
Yep, we do have
Jeez.
lots and lots of turtles. These are one of the most common animals that we get. Sadly, people buy these turtles as little babies when they're about the size of a quarter, not realizing how big they're truly going to get. And they wind up giving them up. These guys live a very long time, 75 to 100 years on average. And most people are not truly prepared to When you see the quarter-sized turtle for sale, I want you guys to realize what that animal is going to grow to be. Okay, so it starts the size of this animal is bigger. An animal this big, you shouldn't get a turtle. Okay.
How long do they live for?
These guys can live for 75 to 100 years on average, so it's very important to realize you're making a very long-term commitment when you get yourself a turtle. Watch your step here. Also wanted to show you guys some of these. A lot of the people who get turtles don't care for them properly. Most of the time it's not intentional, it's that they didn't do their research before they got one. Turtles require ultraviolet lighting, so they need UVB rays. Without UVB lighting, their shells start to deform. Okay, so you can see how badly this guy's shell is deformed. His name is Baloo. He came in recently. Sadly, he's also missing his front leg and one of his back legs. This is something that commonly happens with turtles when they're kept in an enclosure that's too small. They tend to be territorial and they will fight. So you can't crowd them into a tiny little fish tank and think they're going to do okay. So between the lack of UV and the overcrowded situation, you wind up with this poor guy deformed and missing 2 limbs.
Does it hurt them?
The deformation of the shell doesn't really hurt them. I'm sure that hurt, and that probably wasn't like a bite that did that. That was probably over time, you know, getting gnawed on until it came off. So that had to have been incredibly painful. The other problem with this is it's not just that causing the shell to be deformed. That's just one symptom of what they call metabolic bone disease. When they don't have the UVB lighting, they can't process vitamins, minerals, and calcium. So the body starts looking for calcium elsewhere. Ultimately, left untreated, it would lead to organ failure and things like that. So it will ultimately be the turtle's demise if it's not stopped. So we can keep it from progressing at this point by caring for him properly and setting him up the way he should be. But unfortunately, we can't reverse the damage that's already been done.
Charles Dixon is asking, are these red-eared sliders?
These are red-eared sliders. These guys are the most common turtle that you will see anywhere. This is some more examples of red-eared sliders that did not have the proper lighting. And because of that, their shells are severely deformed. These guys don't swim properly. They have to be set up a little bit different than your average turtle. And again, we can't reverse this. All we can do is keep it from progressing. The red-eared slider is one of the most common turtles. Sadly, they are severely overpopulated. People, you know, the first question I'm sure you're going to start getting is, why don't you just release them? Why don't you just release them? These turtles cannot be released, okay? If you have a turtle at home that you can't care for, please remember that releasing them is never an option. These guys are not wild turtles. These were born in captivity. Most of them are coming out of farms in the south of this country. They're bred mainly for the meat trade. Most of them are shipped overseas. Yeah, most of them are shipped overseas to be eaten. But some of them end up being filtered into the pet trade for people. People release them. Red-eared sliders are what's known as an invasive species, which means they have proven themselves able to survive in all sorts of areas that they don't belong, not just in this country, but also in others. For that reason, it's one of the main reasons they're illegal to release. They can take over areas where they shouldn't be. New York State, the native turtle in New York State is the painted turtle. The painted turtle is almost never seen anymore because of people releasing red-eared sliders. If you go to a normal painted turtle habitat, all you're going to find is sliders. They get much bigger, they're a more dominant species, and they have unfortunately pushed the painted turtles almost out of the state of New York. And they're doing this all across the country. When you release a wild turtle, a pet turtle, even into an area where they're native, you can introduce all kinds of diseases and sicknesses to wild populations. There have been tortoises in the United States that have been almost wiped to extinction on people releasing pets. The desert tortoises out in California were severely threatened, and that was caused purely by people releasing their pets back into the wild, which created respiratory diseases that have wiped them out. So for that reason, you can't do that. As pets, people think turtles are boring. Sometimes they can be, but they also can have really great personalities. Once they get used to you, especially when it comes to food, they start to associate you with food. So they're very eager to eat. So sometimes if you get the right turtles and they see the food coming, you shake the can for them, and they'll usually come running. He almost begs like a dog, and there we go, ready for food. He actually wants to eat. Sometimes they just like to actually beg, and then they don't even take the food when we give it to them. Yeah, he's hungry. And turtles will get to know you, believe it or not. Most of it is through association with food. They know who feeds them. But they do get excited to see you. They do get excited when it's feeding time.
They have kind of different personalities even these days.
Yeah, you'll definitely see. You can have a group of turtles, and if you spend time watching them, you'll see each one definitely has an individual personality. When they're set up properly, they are actually very fun to watch. They are very interesting. They can actually be comical.
You have a lot of other animals you guys take in here,
We
right?
do have a lot of other animals. Somebody was dragging out of the cage. You're going to need a step ladder and just bring it down for me. Obviously we have cats and dogs and your normal stuff. We've also recently gotten in a lot of birds. It's a Quaker parrot. These guys are blue and gold macaws. They were brought into us off the street last week. Unfortunately, we weren't prepared for them. We didn't know they were coming, so we do have bigger cages on order for them, but this is just temporary housing. This is Kiwi down here. I think you guys have met Kiwi before. Kiwi lived in an auto body shop, and sadly she was tortured and poked at and not really allowed to be a bird. She doesn't want to step up, so in the cage she's very territorial. Once she's out, she's actually pretty good, but she did really go through a lot of abuse and torture in her life.
How old she is?
We don't know exactly how old she is, unfortunately. But people don't think when they get birds, these guys require a lot. This cage is way too small. This bird's gonna need something twice the size that it is now. As you can see, these guys have plucked their feathers. That can be caused by numerous different things: stress, diet, sometimes it's hormonal. But when you don't care for them properly, this is what happens to these poor birds. They didn't ask to be here, so if you're going to take the responsibility of owning one, you really need to make sure you do your research and are prepared to care for them the way they should be, because this is not a way that they should be living. It's not something they should have to go through.
Wow. This is not a bird.
This is not a bird. This is one of our bearded dragons. Bearded dragons are one of the most common reptiles we see. These are generally will make good pets. They're native to Australia, but they're bred in captivity in this country. This is a full-size dragon. They're generally pretty easy to handle. But they do have specialized requirements. Much like the turtles, they need the UVB lighting. If you can't provide that for them, it'll cause things like metabolic bone disease. So it is very important that you do your research. If you're not prepared to give these animals what they need, do not own one. And I mean that, do your research. Don't go into a pet store and expect them to give you accurate information. A lot of the stores that sell these animals don't even carry the lighting that you would need, let alone be able to explain to you what it is or how to use it. So really do your research before acquiring a pet like this.
How long do they live for?
Bearded dragons can live about 15 to 20 years on average.
How many animals do you guys get in here each year?
We do over 2,000 adoptions a year, so over 2,000 a year coming through. A lot of these animals come in numbers. Things like the red ear sliders, we'll get several hundred a year. It's sadly not a rare thing. They come in almost every day, and they are about the hardest animals to find homes for, because even the handful of people that occasionally want them aren't really always prepared when they get here to what it actually takes. So once you explain all the details, sometimes they're not really prepared to care for them. But keep in mind that shelters have all kinds of animals. It's not just cats and dogs. So anything that you're looking for, adoption is always an option.
Well, thanks, Sean, for sharing us all your stuff. Hopefully I'll get adopted soon.